Welcome to the Republican Professor. This morning for me, because I'm in California, we have a very special guest, the founder of Mama Bear Apologetics. I cannot believe we have Mama Bear Apologetics on the podcast. Mrs. Hillary Ferrer. Did I totally screw your name up?
Nope, that's right.
Okay. Thanks for being here, Hillary and Mama Bear.
Yeah, no problem.
So you're joining us from, do you care to say?
From Iowa. It's one of the long list of things that I said I'd never do. I'd never move to the Midwest was on my list of I'll nevers. And then all the other I'll nevers is basically my resume.
Oh, really?
But this is just one in a long list of many. So yeah, I am a Texas girl. Actually, I call myself the Texifornian because I'm half Texan, half Californian. Spent a lot of time out in California. Never thought I would end up in Iowa, and yet here we are.
God bless you. So what's Iowa like compared to Texas?
So I don't know what Iowa per se is like. We're in a really small town, but it's a very educated small town. I won't say which one it is, but I love that if I have to drive all the way across town, it's like 7 minutes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So my husband and I joke about when we have 4 people get to the stop sign at the same time. You're like, oh, the traffic's awful today.
Yep.
So I would say that's different from both California and Texas. I got so tired of the traffic, but I just kind of like how the pace of life is slower here, and it's got a very community feel. We have, things on Thursday nights during the summer, Thursdays on the square with like barbershop quartets and like the little dance team from, Mrs. Whoever's dance studio down the road. It's just a really charming place to live. So it kind of feels like we're in a time warp back a couple generations.
That's delightful. There are some towns in California like that. And you can't make it up. And I've experienced it a little bit here in Orange County. For the longest time, I had really long commutes to my jobs teaching. For example, I think the furthest commute I had was in Malibu, Pepperdine for a long time. But I got this job teaching constitutional law at Cal State Fullerton, which is close to where I live. It's in my town. So I actually had that small town feel while I was teaching at Cal State Fullerton, because my favorite coffee shop was on this street. My favorite used bookstore was right across the street. 2 blocks away was our church. And then just down the street, I didn't even have to get on the highway. I could just drive through the neighborhood and be at work. So that's something that I really I'm sad that seems to be less and less common, but I'm glad that you're experiencing it. That's awesome. So you have this Mama Bear Apologetics. What would you like to tell us about how that got started, what it is? I know there's a book, and I know you have a podcast. You have quite a following on Facebook. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Because I remember
I
started following you guys back when you had like 3,000 people following you, or I think it was even less than that. I looked recently when I was going to invite you guys on, and I couldn't believe it was like 8 times that. It was like 10 times that or something like that. So I don't know what your secret is, what you're putting in the cereal over there, but what's the story behind Mama Bear Apologetics?
I think it was honestly just a need that nobody was paying attention to. And that's kind of a recipe for exponential growth. I know that I did not plan on the ministry becoming as big as it is. Our stance when we first started it was, even if we only reach 5 women, we are going to be faithful with those 5 women. And that's what we always talked about every single time when we would do podcasts, when we would do blogs, that we were doing what we were doing because we were being faithful to what God had called us to, and not because we were trying to platform or do whatever. And we recognized it could be a totally, nothing ministry, and we were fine with that. So, but God did not have that in mind. So I started Mama Bear when a couple different things all kind of happened around the same time. One of them was there was a woman in a Sunday school that my husband and I had been invited to help out with at my parents' church. And she kind of stood up and gave her testimony of when her child walked away from the faith. And basically she had raised him in Awana and, youth group. He got rededicated when he went to college, but his first job out of college, this boss said, oh, Jesus is like Santa Claus for adults. And there was something about that phrase that made him just go completely off the deep end. And so every time he would come home, she would be like, what questions do you have? What do you need me to help you with? And so he would say, well, I'm kind of wondering about this and about this. And then he would go back and she would just dig into study. And this woman was not an academic. She was not a reader. She was not really anyone you would think would ever be involved in apologetics in the first place. But what she was a mama bear, because she saw something that was threatening her child's faith. And she did whatever she needed to do in order to be there for her son. And so that was kind of one of the things. Secondly, I started noticing how every single conference that I went to at churches always had childcare, except for one type of conference. Can you guess what type of conference that was? Apologetics conferences. For some reason, every other conference had childcare except for this. And I was like, what is up with this? And so people were saying, well, it's only the men who are interested. I'm like, how do you know it's just the men who are interested? Of course, the men are interested, and then someone has to stay home with the kids. Who do you think that's going to be? It's going to be the mom.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And so I just started getting a passion for mom and apologetics. I think I read a statistic that talked about how a mom gets more questions per hour a day than the Queen of England does during an interview. And I mean, you see moms with these kids going, mom, 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 and just asking question after question after question. And so who do you think is getting the spiritual questions first? It's going to be mom. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so I thought we need, and then the final piece of the puzzle, because I've never been into women's ministry. I never really kind of hung out with the girls, growing up. I was always kind of a daddy's girl, and I hung out with guys and other girls who hung out with guys. So there was a lot of just.
Did you have a pocket knife?
I did have a pocket knife. Yeah. And so, but I found out that there was a large demographic of women who wouldn't read something unless it was by women for women. And I thought, holy cow, well, we especially, who's going to take this up? And so I felt like the Lord just kind of showing me this ministry. And I thought, who should I hand this off to? You've given me this to be like the courier to someone, because we didn't have kids at the time. We still don't have kids. My husband and I have talked that we just never had permission to, basically, for a lot of health conditions that I've got, that I would not be able to take care of children on a regular basis. So I thought, no one's going to listen to me because I'm not a mom. And the Lord kind of made it clear that I had something that moms don't have, which is time to research.
Oh, yes.
Yep. So
awesome.
I grabbed a couple ladies and I said, let's do this. And so we started just learning how to use WordPress and learning how to do podcasts. That was like a pretty long, it was like at least a year that we had to take.
Yeah. What was that process? Stuff. How did you get that? Are you a tech person? How did you figure out, did that take courage for you to do that?
Yes, it did. Well, I think the Lord helped a little bit. There was a job that my husband and I had taken with an ex-seminary professor of his that was starting a website that was kind of a tent maker ministry thing. And John and I were originally hired as writers, but I noticed that their images were just a hot mess. And so I have a background in photography and design. So I said, why don't I just do that? So in working for that business, I kind of learned the back end of WordPress. And so that was really helpful. Yeah. Now the podcasting, we had to just teach ourselves. And there was one point where we thought we got the right equipment, and then it took, 6 months to try to get it edited. And then we realized we had to do it in a different format. It was, that's probably what that whole first year was, just until we finally had to find someone that could help us out with that. And I remember the day being at work when I finally learned how to do some of the editing myself, but it just took so long.
Yes.
I just went on my, there was like another women's ministry that had just popped up, and it's like they were umbrellaed under this other thing. I'm like, that must be nice, just to show up and talk and everybody takes care of the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I just went and got on my face and prayed in the office, and I felt the Lord saying, go post something right now in the CAA, which for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's the Christian Apologetics Alignment. Christian. Why am I drawing a blank? Christian Apologetics
Alliance.
Alliance. Thank you. I'm like, I knew it's not association. Alliance. And I just had said, hey, would anybody be interested in helping us edit this podcast? And right away, this guy who's an Army guy who loves apologetics, and just had really wanted to serve, said, oh, I'll do it. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
He is still with us to this day and does all of our stuff.
Wow.
He has been so faithful. And so, yeah, the Lord has just provided what we needed as we went along the way. And we had no concept of, hey, let's write books or whatever, but it wasn't long. It was probably about a year after we had been a ministry that we had a publishing house reach out to us saying, we'd really like you to write a book. And so I did a lot of research to try to see what books were currently out there. There's a ton of question answer books, like, if you hear this question, answer this. And, some of them for parents. Natasha Crane has done a great job with a lot of those. So I wanted to see what wasn't out there. And so I wanted to take a lot of the questions that kids are having, and I wanted to say, where are those questions coming from? Because they're not coming from nowhere. So that kind of ended up being, we're looking at, we call them the isms, all the different worldviews that are kind of undermining kids' ability to have faith in the historic Christian gospel, and kind of answering some of those lies. So that first book was called Mama Bear Apologetics, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Cultural Lies. And that's gone unexpectedly well. And then the publisher wanted another book on sexuality, which I turned down over and over again, because I just kind of wasn't sure if I wanted to invite that kind of vitriol, but I finally did it. And had one of our other mama bears, Amy Davison, kind of contribute some to that. And
there's a lot of bullying out there. There's a lot of cancel culture. There's a lot of viciousness, and I've seen it firsthand in LA and California on the college campuses. So I can imagine what you're going through and what that was like for you. What I love about your story is the fact that you saw clearly that moms are on the front lines of apologetics.
Mm-hmm. Even if they don't know it. Mm-hmm.
They are the Marine Corps of this cultural fight, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But they're there, and who is preparing them? Who is answering that call for that incredible need, which knows no boundary of state, knows no boundary of country, actually, either.
Yep.
And I just like to sit in that for a second. Just like moms are on the front lines, there's an incredible need. Who is meeting that need? And so you were like, I will go. I will go. And I don't know how I'm going to get these needs taken care of. I don't know how. I got this need over here. I got this. This gives me anxiety. This is maybe causing some fear. But fear is required for courage. Mm-hmm. It cannot be courage if you don't have fear. If you don't have, that's why a computer can't have courage, because a computer doesn't experience any fear. So to me, that you're doing something courageous. How many books do you have now? Is it 2 books?
So
now?
we've got 2 books, and then we have a study guide for the first one, and a discipleship workbook for the sexuality book that will be released in September.
A workbook, okay. So you had to learn all about publishing and podcasting, and that's a lot. Like the back end of WordPress, I don't understand that stuff. I mean, geez, that's like a jungle.
Yeah.
Now, I'm so in awe of what you're doing, because as a professor, I get them in the classroom after moms have done their job. Oftentimes moms have done an awesome job with the resources that they have.
Yeah.
But you can tell sometimes that the resources just aren't there. The resources aren't there, and the students are not prepared. They're coming to college and they're not prepared. So I'm very interested in the backstory of that. That's why I'm interested in having you on the podcast, just because I see what they're going up against, and I see their level of preparation, and I
Mhm.
just wonder, is there anybody else that's like taking care of some of this back end stuff, like before they get to college? Anybody who's doing that work, I'm very interested in. So thank you.
Mhm.
That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
How
I,
long was it fair for me to say that you were the founder of Mama Bear? Because you said the word "we" a few times, and I didn't want to leave people out.
yeah, no, I founded it. I had a friend of mine who I said, you want to come and do some of the podcasts with me? And she contributed some to the book, but she has since gone on to do her own projects, mainly going on to get an advanced degree. And so we have a couple. I've always wanted it to be a we. I never wanted Mama Bear Apologetics to be me. I've always wanted to surround myself with other women. So like Julie Lose is one that contributed to the first book. She was one of the first people I told about the idea. And so we brainstormed on stuff. But I mean, when it came down to who was like writing the stuff and who was putting the website together and who was editing the podcast and who was doing all that stuff, it was making logos. That was me. But I just wanted it to be a group project, even if people could only contribute a little bit. And so now I've got a really great team of I've got a woman who she's our admin, but she's so much more. She just does everything. And then we have Lindsay and Amy who help out a lot. Lindsay's great with scheduling, Amy's great with writing, and we still have Jeremiah, who has been editing our podcasts and now our vlogcasts since basically that day when I was on my face on the floor at the office. And I'm trying to think of and a girl Robin, who helps with some of the tech stuff. She really enjoys learning some of the tech stuff. So it's like when we really needed somebody, I've just prayed and the Lord has brought the person there. And so we very much enjoy our team. And
Yeah, your admin is Nancy, right?
yes, and she's
Nancy.
amazing.
Yeah, I want to make sure she got named there. Okay,
Yes.
that's awesome. Yeah, so your logo and your branding is really cool.
This was a rebrand, and someone else did this for us. Our original one was me, but this one was we had a company help do kind of like a rebrand and a redesign on the website, because you can only go so far when it's someone who doesn't know what they're doing. So thankfully we got some help with that eventually.
Do you like watch nature shows or something? How did you come up with the bear? Like, do you watch like those National Geographic things? Did you see like a bear cub or like a mama bear like killing? I don't know.
Well, I think the concept of Mama Bear is pretty ubiquitous in the United States, and it was kind of interesting. I did a book launch party for Indonesia a couple of weeks ago, where they had the question. They asked me, "What is a mama bear?" And I realized they don't have any bears over there, so they don't recognize the connotation. So the mama bear, it's just this creature that a lot of people in America know is she's sweet and maternal and cuddly until you mess with her kids, and then she is going to open up a cannon. You're going to wish you hadn't been born, because she's just going to come out and defend. We were always taught that, back when I was young and you're camping, if you ever see a mama bear with her cubs, you just back away. You try to not see them. It's like we were taught that there was no creature that was as fierce as a mama bear protecting her cubs. And so when I saw the woman, her name was Jody Weiss, stand up at that one Sunday school and was given her testimony about all the things that she did to, teach herself postmodernism and, all the apologetics topics so that she could help her son. I remember sitting back and thinking, what is that? I thought, that's a mama bear. And I was like, wouldn't it be amazing? It's like mama bears will come out in a variety of situations, but how amazing could it be if we could kind of trigger that instinct, that protective instinct, and steer it towards something as productive as apologetics, when they realize that their children's faith is being torn to shreds, or as, people are purposely wanting to attack their children's faith. You're going to raise up a different beast than you've ever seen in homeschool, than you've ever seen in Awana. There's just a completely different beast that rises up and says, we are going to get to the bottom of this. Not my kids, not today. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to create kind of like an army of mama bears who will study things they wouldn't normally study and will do things they wouldn't normally do so that they can prepare their kids intellectually for the tenets of the faith they're going to be challenged. You know, back then it was just in college, but really now in high school and now middle school and elementary school, it just keeps getting younger and younger and younger. Back when I was in high school, we had something called Mind Games, where it was like this week-long camp that juniors and seniors could go to that kind of went into worldview stuff. Now we have a bunch of different places that have different gap year programs like Impact 360, Summit Ministries, a couple other ones where they do this worldview training, but it's still for juniors and seniors or people who have just graduated. We need to be doing this for middle school on up. And so there's a lot more great resources that are out there, but again, they're all just for youth. They are not going into the home and equipping the mom to do it. One of the things that one of my I would say colleagues, Mary Jo Sharp, has mentioned from her talks is that when someone comes and asks a question at the end of one of her talks, if a man's asking a question, often that question is something that he struggles with. But however, a lot of times when a woman is asking a question, she's asking on behalf of someone, or there's someone she's ministering to that has this question. So there's just like this ministerial heart and this relational dynamic for women being involved in apologetics that is different from men. And so I wanted to create a space where we didn't just have a bunch of women doing apologetics like men and then saying it's for women. We wanted it to be for women the way women are already thinking, which is how can I love and serve the people in my life without burning bridges and being argumentative? Because a lot of times apologetics was seen as, you know, debate and that's all. And I've had so many women say, I always had such a bad taste in my mouth about apologetics, but I love your book. And that's something I can do. It's building bridges, it's having conversations. And it's just kind of a different approach.
Wow. 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 Okay. I'm going to make some comments. And so first of all, the bear thing that every woman that I've mentioned your branding to, they get it in 2.5 nanoseconds. I don't have to explain it. That's why I knew you were onto something with the branding. I was like, I don't have to explain this. They've never looked at your stuff. They get it right there. They say, awesome. I'm going to look that up. So that's huge right there. The mom bear, it's very interesting because a mama bear, the very first thing I think of is incredibly strong, way stronger than any other threat to that little bear, right? Incredibly strong. I mean, you could think vicious, but viciousness is not enough. Strength, competency, in other words, if there's a threat to that little bear, there is a competent thing that's going to get in the way. That's what I noticed. And so that's what I love about another thing is because it immediately brings to mind strength and competency for the task at hand, which is protecting that little bear. So I love that. And I think that's brilliant. I mean, you obviously must have gotten a download or something from the Holy Spirit or something like that. But so you mentioned Impact 360. Yeah. I mean, Summit Ministries, I'm very familiar with them. I went through Summit Ministries myself when I was 14. I was the youngest one there. Yeah. I'm not saying I understood it, but it must have made some impact on me because it started
look at your career where you are now. It made an impact.
Yeah, that's right. What I remember about Summit was that I was the youngest one there. Well, there was actually one other kid that was younger than me. There was a 13-year-old. But I was the youngest one there, and there was a book table, and there was all these books, and there was all these people excited about books. That's what I remember, and it was cool to like books. And I went through 4 times, all 4 years of high school.
Kudos to you and your parents.
Yeah, that's right. And my dad was a carpet layer. You know, my parents were not intellectuals at all. My grandpa never went to college. He's the one that paid for it. He he wasn't really that big of a reader either, but he had a lot of books. So, and then Impact 360, I know about them because I just had John on the podcast. That John Basey is the guy that runs that. For you're talking about the Chick-fil-A family and the in Pine Mountain, Georgia,
Yeah,
Impact 360 Institute. Yeah, we just
Impact
had him on.
360. Jonathan Morrow is the guy that I know that
Okay.
is doing that. He's an old professor of mine. In fact, a lot of it, I would say a lot of the stuff in my first book I can trace back to lectures from him. So,
Oh, cool. Yeah, and so when you said we need a middle school version of that, see what you're doing is you have this insight on what the real need is. It's like, okay, we're doing some great stuff here. Great. We need a version of that one step younger because the world is getting crazier.
yes.
It's not like it was even when I was a kid. Wouldn't you say that's true for you?
Oh yeah. I've said that, the world is different from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my cousins, when they talk to their mom about parenting, one of my cousins, the mom will be like, well, you just have to. And she's like, no, you don't get to give me this advice. The world is different than when you were a parent. It was way easier. And so, yeah, I just think about how thankful I am that I was born when I was, because I don't know if I don't know what would have happened to me in this kind of environment.
There's another thing that you mentioned which is the nature of apologetics itself, which it has tended to be kind of debate focused. It's
Mm-hmm.
not all that. So all of you guys that have been doing dialogical, I got it, sure. That's understandable. But I think it's fair to say preparing for like a debate, that has been a major focus of apologetics. I think of one of my professors, which is William Lane Craig, and he's really good at that. He goes up there and he debates, and he's incredibly competent about that. But when it's kids, like middle schoolers and even
Mm-hmm.
elementary, you're having a dialogue with that little one, and their little soul and mind is being formed, their heart is being formed, and the debate format isn't really helpful. And it's actually not even helpful oftentimes for adults, which is what
It's
I
a
really
very
think is interesting about your
Mhm.
insight there.
It's a small minority, I'd say, who really respond to that. And I mean, I should know my husband was a debater. He has done all sorts of debates on the problem of evil and on pro-life stuff. He loves that format, but I would never ever want to do that. I have no interest in it. But I would say, especially for younger kids, you're trying to help them piece together a worldview. I think sometimes parents kind of put the worldview together for their kids, almost like they're cutting up their meat and vegetables and then presenting it to them. And once the kid gets in a situation where part of that worldview, someone bumps the table and that worldview goes all over the place, they have no idea how to put it back together themselves because they weren't consciously putting it together. So I would say, like, if we're looking at resources, there's a girl named Elizabeth Urbanowitz who has something called Foundation Worldview curriculum that is aimed at grades 3 through 5 for teaching a lot of these foundational worldview issues and just some basic apologetics. I would say also Sean McDowell and partnered with Awana. It did the Awana Advocates curriculum. And even though it says it's for high school, I honestly think that a lot of middle schoolers could follow that as well. But I just think the best tactic is the one that my pastor's wife used to say. And she was usually meaning it in terms of like, sex and bad words and stuff like that. But she says, I don't want my kids hearing anything that they haven't heard in my kitchen first. And I would say the same thing for apologetics and just arguments against the Christian faith. Our kids shouldn't hear any objection to the faith that they haven't heard in our kitchen first, right before we refute it, to help them think through that. That way they have this history, this rich history to draw upon, that when there's a tough question, there's even tougher answers that are there. You just have to look for them.
That's awesome. What was Elizabeth's last name again?
Urbanowitz, it's Urbanowicz.
And it was called Foundation Worldview.
Uh-huh.
Grades 3 to 5. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Grades. Okay.
And she just released a logic class for that age. She's released
Now you're
basic
talking.
apologetics. Yeah,
I taught
she's
logic, so
finishing.
that was
Yeah.
my main thing I taught was logic.
Oh, you will love her logic curriculum, and then she's got one on hermeneutics that's going to be coming out soon.
Oh wow, logic and hermeneutics. Dang.
She's so great with putting it into kid language. She was a third grade teacher for about 10 years.
Third grade teacher. Wow. I don't know enough about this area of expertise, but it seems like there's got to be all sorts of pitfalls and landmines here developing this material for kids. Is it just like kind of try something and hit and miss, or you continually refining things? Because kids are so different. Like each kid is different. Like you might have an
Yeah.
autistic, you might not even know this kid is autistic. You just know that socially he's a little, he might be able to really drill down on a topic and wants his questions answered.
Yeah.
And then somebody else is just trying to fit in socially. So how do you reach each kid individually? How do you know what to aim for?
Well, that's why we do what we do at Mama Bear Apologetics. People keep asking us, do you have a kids curriculum for this? Do you have this for kids? And we keep telling them, no, our ministry is not for kids. Our ministry is for moms. If the moms can get the information to the point where they understand it well enough, then guess who's an expert on their child? That would be mom. And so if there's something that she needs to explain to him, she has to first really fully understand it herself first. And once she fully understands it, then she can adapt it to her child, because there's really no way to have a kid's curriculum that touches every single aspect of every single kid. But if you can get the mama bears to understand it well enough, they can adapt the material to whatever their children need.
Do you find that there's a lot of work because women are reaching out about specific things they're encountering that maybe you haven't talked about or haven't given them a resource for yet?
Yeah, I get lots and lots of emails every day from women for different reasons, and I try to just I try to always answer as personally as I can and give them some of my ideas, and then if it seems like one that really needs more follow up, I'll welcome them to follow up with me. But some of them are just it's questions that I've heard before, or I have resources that I can point them to. But again, it's usually me pointing them to resources for them to understand. I haven't gone through a ton of kids curriculum stuff, just because that would probably be a weakness of mine, is just, I haven't taught kids. I've taught high schoolers before. I haven't taught young kids, and I haven't had young kids. So it's like, I can imagine what it's like to translate some of those things into kid language, but that can't be my main thing. My main thing is helping moms to translate it to kind of a general kid language, and then she can tweak it from there.
What do you think is if you had to just guess, the biggest issue or set of issues that is on your radar as far as specifics about apologetics?
Golly, there's basically all the stuff that's going on right now is like a bunch of dominoes that have just, toppled over, and every single one of those dominoes, if we could just stand firm on one of those domino pieces, it would stop it. But, the very first one, the very last one, they've all just kind of toppled over. So I would say just the idea that the postmodernism bringing this idea that there is no such thing as absolute truth. There is nothing that applies to everyone that's true for everyone. I would say everything undergirds that. I would going on a little further from that, in our book, we call it emotionalism. It's this idea that, now that we've kicked truth to the curb, we still have this kind of truth vacuum where we're trying to find what is true. And so there's all these different ways we trying to find what my truth is. And so this concept of emotions being able to point towards truth, I like to say in that chapter that as long as your emotions are disciplined by scripture, reason, and reality, then yeah, you can use your emotions for truth. But if you're missing those three things, then you have no idea what direction your emotions are pointing you to. So I would say that's a big one right now, that people just assume that if I feel it, it's true. And then once you get past any kind of the religious and stuff, once you really don't have a truth that's binding for everyone, all you're left with is power. And then that's where we get into all the identity politics and the Marxism and stuff like that, that none of this would have been possible had we not jettisoned truth first, had we not then made truth only accessible through subjective experiences. And now we're having all these conflicts of people's individual truths. So we're left with power dynamics. So I would say those three things right there are some of the big ones in terms of just being able to understand the gospel. But the number one thing that is really getting us right now, and people saw it coming for a while, but I don't think any of us knew how fast it was going to take over, is the whole sexual identity and gender identity issues. That if the entire purpose of the gospel is to take a holy God and reintroduce and create right relationship with sinful man, if you redefine, well, first off, they redefined who God was. Now they're redefining what a human is. Once you've redefined these two entities, it's very, very difficult to have the gospel because you don't have the true identity of either of these parties. And one of the ways they're doing that is through a twisting of words. So if that's another thing, words right now are under attack. I couldn't find a good word when I was writing the book, so I coined the term linguistic theft. It's where you have a purposeful hijacking of words, changing their definition, and then reintroducing them as tools of propaganda. And you see it everywhere. Like that's been one of the chapters I would say that people say they have the most aha moments on, that once they see this redefinition of words everywhere, all of a sudden the reason why nobody can understand what each other is talking about, it's practically like a modern day Babel. So I know those were a lot of things, but I would say that's the web that we're in right now. We can't pick one. There's a web that we're caught in, and those are all the different points of the web.
Yeah, the word thing, that really gets me, because I'm in academics. The first thing you're supposed to do is define your terms.
Yes.
That's how it is in law. My PhD's in law, public law and American politics. And that's definitely how it is in philosophy. My philosophy mentor, Gordon R. Lewis, taught philosophy for 40 years at Denver Seminary. God bless him. He was my mentor in high school. He drilled into us, me and Robbie, as we met with him once a week during high school or senior year. He would say, define your terms and keep the definition the same. Keep the same definition. So when the marriage redefinition thing was happening in California about 15 years ago or so, I was in the middle of academic-y stuff about that. I presented I did a presentation on a Catholic campus in Los Angeles in 2011 on the definition of marriage. With Rebecca Roback Morse was there, and we had another person from the philosophy department there, and a bunch of activists came to respond to what I was saying, and all I was saying was, the definition of marriage in my MacBook Pro is a union between a man and a woman by which they become husband and wife. And that's what it is in English language, going way, way before Shakespeare, and in other languages too, like Greek and Latin and Chinese, stuff like that. And anyway, so they said, well, they said I was taking rights away from them. And I said, well, I never thought that I had a right to redefine the term. You feel like you have that right. They denied that they were redefining anything. I said, if you give me an hour, you will agree with me. They gave 40, and to their credit, these activists on that side, there was one man he told me he was married to this other man that was right next to him. And he said, if you're correct, then we're not married. And I said, I think you think you're married, but I don't think you are married because of the definition of the term marriage. It's not me, it's the term. So I said, if you give me an hour, I will, I'll convince you. 45 minutes later, they gave me an hour, and I said, you're not going to call me names. I'm not going to call you names.
Ground
Okay.
rules.
Right. Well, one of the first things we covered was not only are you trying to redefine marriage, you're trying to redefine the term hate. And
Yes.
you're using the redefinition of the term hate to redefine marriage. And
Yes.
to their credit, they agreed with me, because the word hate does not just mean disagreement. Because otherwise, their slogan for their political side was no, the proposition was Proposition 8, defining marriage. So they were saying no hate, no H8, like no hate,
Oh, got it. Yep.
And so I said, well, but if hate is just all that is disagreement, well, then you disagree with me. And so by your own definition, you hate me. So what you mean is yes, hate, just only on your side. Okay, that was the beginning of the unraveling of their side.
Yep.
Now, they still obviously held their view about the definition of marriage, but they held it for different reasons. And I think it was helpful because and to your point about dialogue, see, once the presentation was over, there was no debate. If it was a debate, it wouldn't have probably worked. I had to actually get down there in the crowd, and when I say crowd, I was surrounded by
I
these
believe you.
I was surrounded by these activists, and I just calmly said, I can take you through that court decision that you're so proud of, and I can show you the logical fallacies in the decision. And he said, I got it on my iPad. That's how much I love it. So please do. And I said, okay, I'll tell you and I'll show you. He's using this word marriage. He's using it equivocally. He redefined it without telling you. He defines it now as any close union, which is also in the dictionary. That's also in the English dictionary.
Like
So
the marriage of peanut butter and jelly kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right. That's how the word is used. But it's always used that way of non-humans. And the MacBook Pro, and I had it. I had my computer. I showed him. Here's M1, union between a man and woman by which they become husband and wife. M2, every word has a spelling. I say spelling instead of word. Every spelling has multiple definitions. Sometimes it between an adjective and a verb, or it's a different part of speech. Like minute is spelled different than minute. Minute is a noun. Minute is an adjective. So I said these are same spellings, but they're different words. And any close union, and the example that Apple gave was
what year was this?
It was 2011.
Okay.
And I checked the dictionaries. It was up the same dictionary definition up through 2015 in Oxford English. I stopped checking after that because that's when the Supreme Court decision came down. And then that alters the data, because when the Supreme Court tells you to start talking differently, then the dictionary isn't just reporting how people talk anymore. It's reporting also how people are forced to talk. So that's a different, but it was the example that the computer gave was a marriage between jazz, blues, pop, and gospel, or something like that. So I pointed out
that sounds like a fun concert.
there's 4 things in that marriage, because the word union doesn't just mean 2.
Yeah.
That's why in the Civil War, the Union against the Confederacy, the Union didn't just have 2 states. And so I said, if you go with any close union, then you have to open it up to more than 2 people.
Yep.
And they were like, no, you can't. I said, well, okay. They said it's about sexual orientation and you can't change that. I said, how many sexual orientations are there? They were forgetting about bisexuality. And I said, what's a bisexual marriage? Tell me about what that is. How many are in that? So I said, if your first foot forward in your definition of your terms, this is what I love about what you're saying about hijacking terms. If your first foot forward in definition terms is that the tradition is wrong, and so we're using the term this way, well, then you can't use the tradition to hem in what you're saying. And 2 people in a marriage comes from the tradition. Where else would it come from? In fact, we get 2 because logically, if the opposites are there, opposite sex, that implies two people, not more than two. Anyway, so
Yeah.
we finally that's just an example of, and we left, and they listened carefully, and that was probably one of the best examples that I've seen of dialogical stuff, like what you're talking about with apologetics. That's when I started really believing in it. And you
Hmm.
know what? Socrates had this idea a long time ago. Socrates, have
Yeah.
you ever read the Socratic dialogues?
I
You
haven't
ever
read the
read?
Socratic dialogues, but I'm familiar enough with the Socratic method.
Yeah. So that's, I think kids can really benefit from this whole thing. So you know about hijacking of terms. That's a really delicate thing. It's kind of, if you get kids starting to think about that, you're going to
Yeah.
grow these awesome, like, you know, I wanted to say monster, but that's the wrong word. I mean, in a good way, for the
Yeah.
gospel.
So
When
we
you say,
recommend to parents like putting a buzzwords board next to the TV, that when you hear a word that keeps being redefined, you put it on your buzzwords board, because a lot of times when people say this word, they're not meaning what you think they're meaning.
oh, wow, interesting. Tell me more about the buzzwords board. What's that look like?
Oh, I mean, it's just pretty simple. It's just an activity that you can do where the words that we identify in the first book, let me see, I've got this. I think we have love and hate and tolerance, of course, because the idea of tolerance requires there to be disagreement. If you don't have disagreement, you can't have tolerance. So people aren't asking for tolerance, they're asking for agreement, which are two different things. I say justice and equality, the concept of justice. Uh, Justice and equality has become so, if anything is different,
Hmm.
it's become unjust and unequal. And equity, the word equity, is meaning for everybody to end up in the same place, as opposed to everybody having equal opportunity. It's now everybody's going to have equal outcomes, which anyone who's studied this at all knows that the only way to guarantee equal outcomes is to control, to control everything. Basically, there's no way you can guarantee equal outcomes without controlling everything.
Right.
um
So wait, are these words that you're exposing the kids to, like justice and equity?
Oh, this is the words that are in the book. This is our Mama Bear
So,
Apologetics book.
okay. So little
So
kid, so you're saying moms are having conversations about justice, these actual words,
yeah.
getting
Hmm.
these words on the kids' radar.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
bigot would be another one.
Ooh,
Authentic would be another one.
wow,
I'd
really?
say that this idea of authentic, at least within the Christian community, it's gone from being honest about where you are to almost like celebrating what a big hot mess you are. And it's like, so we go
Oh,
into that.
that's interesting. Wow, you guys aren't
I
messing
was
around. You guys
no.
are not messing around. Dang, you get right into it. Holy cow. I can't
Yep.
imagine if my parents were my parents were not doing this with me. So, but they
Mm,
didn't really need to, because public schools were relatively safe back then.
yeah.
Wow.
And of course, what we know now, which I didn't get into the book just because you can only open yourself up to so many things at once. But I would say racism and
Ooh,
white
wow.
supremacy are two of the ones
Yes,
that are
that's true.
just, you can make it mean whatever you want.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
Oppressed,
I
oppressor.
disagree with you. So you're racist.
Yes, exactly. Or oppression and oppressor. And so we go into linguistic theft in the first book. And then I bring up something in the second book, which is this one right here, the Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality, where we talk not only about linguistic theft, but with linguistic smuggling, which is where you have a previously defined term that everybody already agrees on, and then you have to put something into it. And I would say one of the biggest ones you'll have is the things that are getting smuggled into the word bullying, because bullying has become such a big topic. um I think it's silly that
Bullying.
we create certain groups that we need to protect from bullying.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story of being
Yeah.
bullied. I mean,
No
the
kidding.
the redhead freckle faced kid across time, unless you lived in Ireland, was always bullied for being redheaded and freckle faced. Or I was teased
Yeah.
mercilessly for being so pasty white when I was young and
Mm,
having freckles. So this idea of like defining which groups are being bullied. How about just nobody bullies? How about let's define bullying
what
and
a
say don't do
concept.
that? I
What a
know, right?
concept.
But this
Wow.
idea that now they're smuggling the concept of using the wrong pronoun into bullying. So now we have these zero bullying or zero tolerance bullying areas in school. And now if someone uses the wrong pronoun, that's been smuggled into the concept of bullying. But all the administrator has to do is say your child was bullying another, and we have a zero tolerance policy about that.
Right. Now all you have to do is redefine zero.
Yes.
Well, what I mean by zero is one. There's one option, one, well, I don't know how to do that, but yeah, I mean, where do you go? I have a lot of fun in the classroom redefining terms. My students, for example, I'll give you one example. Professor, are you for traditional marriage? And I'll say, well, okay. One time I actually did this. I brought in a bunch of dictionaries to Pepperdine because the situation was there's a restaurant in Venice Beach called Mao's Kitchen. It's named after Mao Zedong. It honors Mao Zedong, the brutal Chinese communist dictator that killed something like, I Googled it for the kids. I call them kids, even though they're technically adults, I guess.
Yeah, they're all kids to me too. No.
And there was a disagreement on Google between whether Mao Zedong killed 45 million or was it 78 million? We don't know, but it's in the tens of millions. So then, okay, here's the context. So someone mentioned something about Chick-fil-A and how evil that company is. This is at Pepperdine, which is allegedly a Christian college.
Yep.
So I said, well, which is worse, Chick-fil-A or Mao's Kitchen? What do you think? And they said, oh, Chick-fil-A. And I said, why? I'm holding my tongue, right? I'm trying to be dialogical. Why? Because he discriminated.
Yep.
So that's the level. And I'm like, okay, so Mao indiscriminately killed. That's better.
45
that's a lot
million
better.
minimum people.
And Chick-fil-A never killed anybody. So anyway, had this dialogue. So I was like driving back and I was like, Lord, how do I reach these people? How? And I really do feel like, I don't know if you believe that you can get like God will talk to you, but I really do feel like, and not like an audible voice or anything like that, but just a strong sense in my spirit and a clear picture in my mind of go to the used bookstore. So I went to the used bookstore and I spent like $100 on used dictionaries. I didn't even have to look at them. And some of them were awesome. I mean, some of these dictionaries, one was an Oxford English Dictionary, two volumes. It was so big. It actually came with the not microscope, magnifying glass. It actually
we just got this set for my father for Christmas. It's got the little drawer with the magnifying glass, and it comes out, and it's like 8 on the page, so that it's like it's actually condensed.
And
we did that after we saw.
You need it. Yeah, you have that. You got it.
We got that for my dad after there's a movie that came out recently with Sean Penn that was like on the making of the the Madman and the Professor. It was a great movie.
That's a good movie, with Mel Gibson. Braveheart. I kept getting I make these stupid comments in movies like, what is Braveheart doing? No, that's Braveheart. And people are like, shut up. I'm trying to watch the movie. But anyway, but I brought that in. They were like puppies at feeding time looking at the dictionary. They were shocked. They were shocked. I had some from 1800s, some up to 2015, Oxford English Dictionary. And they were shocked. And I said, so Chick-fil-A's big sin was they believed the dictionary. They were using the English language. And meanwhile, Mao is murdering people. I think they were able to see just how sick intellectually and morally and spiritually that was. So I mean, this whole thing about words is so, but they asked me, they said, are you for traditional marriage? And this is where I brought the dictionaries. Is I said, look under T for traditional marriage. It's not under there. It's under M.
Yeah.
Because the word is marriage. So it's like, it's just so odd. It'd be like if I was walking into the grocery store and you asked me if do I want a traditional apple? Well, it's just an apple. The
Yeah.
word, you just can just use the word, and so, I have these little techniques I do like that where I ask them, uh, are you talking about the traditional word traditional or the new traditional word?
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a
eh,
lot of mind games you can play when people start just, oh, when
you
they've
got to
drunk
be
the
delicate.
Kool-Aid and
Yeah, you got to be delicate though if you're trying to raise people that are sharp,
yeah.
because you don't want them to think that anything goes. And it's actually the opposite. I'm trying to get them to see that there's really uh, something you can hold on to.
Hmm.
So, for example, they ask, don't, when they look at the dictionaries, this is always what they do. They go, well, can't words change? But can't words change? And so
Yeah.
I'll say, when you say the word change, my guess is you have a certain definition in mind for the word change, right?
Hmm.
And my guess is it's in that dictionary, right? It's not so I say, do you mean traditional change where it means become different? Or do you mean the
I
new
love
kind of
this.
change where it means to say the same? And they look at me like, because I believe words can change in the new
Mhm.
kind of way where they stay the same.
Yes.
And they're
I
just
love
like,
it. I
at
love
this point,
it.
I'm just like, dude, just use language and be careful. And so what I love about what you're doing is this has to be working for kids. It has to be,
Mhm.
because as soon as you get them thinking for themselves, even
Yes.
at the risk of maybe not fitting in. See, that's what I worry about is these kids, they want to fit in. I want to fit in. I know there's a huge pressure. When I
Yep.
was in seventh grade, everybody was rolling up their jeans and I didn't understand why. And I never got the memo. I never got the email. And so you're supposed to just roll up no one understands why. There's never a
Mhm.
discussion about it. And same with,
No.
so how do you what about that sociological fact of just thinking for yourself and that pressure to fit in?
Yeah.
How's that come in?
Well, I would say that I don't know, I'm like the worst person to talk about on fitting in. I never felt like I fit in ever. That's why I think like if I'd been born during this time, I'm like, number one, I didn't get along. I know some people like the Myers-Briggs, some people don't, but I'm a T instead of an F. I'm a thinker, not a feeler. So that right there tells me I'm only with 25% of other women. 75% of women are the F's, the feelers. So that right there has this huge chasm between you and the other middle school girls. And then the fact that I just had a lot of social anxiety, and some of these things I didn't like. A lot of the traditional girl stuff I liked, talking about ideas and all these different things that if I were born now, I would be told that I felt that way because I was actually a boy in a girl's body, or that my sexuality, if I've always felt different, then maybe this is why I'm different. Um, sometimes I think that we have enough kids who there's a lot of kids who want to fit in, but there's some kids that are if they'll get to a certain point where it just gets to such nonsense that they're like, you know what, I can't fit in, so I'm not even going to try anymore. Like, so Amy, one of our mama bears, her son is like this. God bless him. I love him. He's hilarious. That he almost kind of does the opposite. He's almost like his own little rebel. But nowadays, the rebellious nature is where you actually go back to traditional things. And so it's just this beautiful kind of rebellion that's going on. Uh, and I think he had he was supposed to give a presentation for his class, a persuasive presentation, and everybody else gave it on bullying, and he decided to give it on why you shouldn't introduce gender identity to elementary school kids.
Oh,
This is
God
like
bless
a
him.
13-year-old boy, just
He's
because he has
vintage. I'll
yeah.
give you a word for that, vintage. And that's a
Yes,
popular
yes.
word, vintage. He is vintage.
Yeah, he has inherited his mother's intellect and his father's kind of rebelliousness and married those two things together, and he's a fabulous human being. But I think that as a Christian, if Christian culture and regular culture weren't that radically different when I was growing up, it was still the basic, Judeo-Christian ethic, with a
Yeah,
couple things, it was, you could, kids would still drink, kids would still have sex, but there were still enough people that would be, if you went
right,
too far, at least for girls, if you did that
right.
too much, oh, she's a slut, or, whatever, you
Yeah,
still had
sure.
something that was a social stigma associated
Yeah.
with those things. You don't have that anymore. If I had been in a culture, I'll
Mm.
tell you why I loved coming to California is because California, nobody pretended to be a Christian because it was the cool thing to do.
Yep.
I love being in California because the people who were there in the church actually believed what they said they believed. And coming from the
Mhm.
South, that wasn't always the case. So I think that we are going to have a backlash that is coming for kids that say, I'm just not even going to try. This is ridiculous. It's like we kind of have this in-between generation that's just wanting so badly to make every, not hurt anybody's feelings, not offend anybody because they're not aware that it's impossible to not offend anybody. That's just an impossible task. You're
Yeah,
always going to offend somebody.
that's right.
And they just kind of keep going down this path. And I'm seeing some of the kids that are a little bit younger that are getting old enough to see the nonsense, just kind of shaking their head going, nope, I'm not playing that game.
Hmm.
And I think the kids that when they are given the resources to think through things for themselves, the ones that are taught about worldview, one of my favorite stories so far from Mama Bear is this woman who contacted me and said, oh my gosh, you need to be in the movie theater with my child. If she sees something that's a bad worldview, she'll yell out in the middle of the movie, bad worldview. And I was like, I would just be given my like fist pump if I were in that same movie theater. But when kids start to realize how to think critically through things, how to reason through things, it is incredibly empowering. And now sometimes some parents might not like it because now your kids can call you when you're using logical fallacies.
Right.
And sometimes you're like, it's just because I said so. And they're
That's
like,
right.
appeal to authority. But this is the legitimate appeal to authority.
Mhm.
I just see a lot of kids start to not care as much when they actually feel empowered that there is truth on their side and there's logic and there's reason. And I don't know. I have hope for especially like I have hope for some of the kids now. I think the generation that is just buying hook, line, and sinker into all the gender identity madness. I think this is just one giant experiment on this generation that we are going to look back and ask, how could anyone allow this to happen one day? But we don't quite have enough hindsight for that yet.
Yeah. The Myers-Briggs thing that you mentioned about the thinker versus feeler. How many people on your team are they all thinkers, you think? Or
They're all T's. We're
yeah,
all the ones that didn't fit in with other girls. And we've had like
yeah,
one or two that were the F's on the team before. And I think they're very valuable to have because they really can bring that
right.
softness and the the relational aspect. I would say probably some of us have learned, I've had to learn the language of girls and through doing this ministry. And so it's been something where like
Yeah,
I have to remember I don't just answer a question and then press send. I have to say, thank you for reaching out. Oh, that sounds like a really good question. And then say it. And then like, kind of
right.
piece together some of the answers. So I think it's stuff that you can learn. It just doesn't come naturally, but it does make the team have so much less drama, I gotta say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. There's another part of the Myers-Briggs, which is the I versus the S, the intuitive versus the sensor. And apparently
That's
from what
the
people,
NS.
yeah, the
I is introvert. N is
sorry,
intuitive.
sorry about that.
Yep.
That's actually my S coming out, is that I misspell the I or the N. But yeah, the sensor is really good for like definitions of terms
Yep.
and like, making sure people are on track with that, and very sensitive to changes of definitions. The
They're
N is kind
detailed
of
people.
the N, for the intuitives, I feel like you can pretty much say whatever you want and then they go, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And even if you didn't say it very well, and it's not
Mhm.
clear that they understand what you said.
They're the big picture people where to try to
Yeah,
describe something, sometimes you have no idea, are we thinking the same thing? Because we're not
right.
having the communication.
Yeah, they might not
I
follow
think,
up either. They might not follow up
mhm,
with clarifying questions. And I wonder how much of
yeah.
that is just a personality thing, or they think it's not socially acceptable to follow up. Like meaning other people go, just let it go, or whatever, like fit in. They don't say it like that, but so
Mhm.
the Myers-Briggs issue, having that on your radar, I think will strengthen what you're doing, because there is such a a variety of different people that are coming to the apologetic task.
Mhm.
So, and kids too. I mean, kids have different. So, yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Hillary.
Yeah.
Really much, very much enjoyed talking with you. How do people support what you're doing or find out more information for themselves?
So to find out more, we have a website, www.mamabearapologetics.com, and that's Mama, M-A-M-A. We got all sorts of weird ways that people spell that, but so Mama Bear Apologetics. We're kind of sold wherever books are sold. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes and Noble, you can go to christianbook.com. Even some of the Hobby Lobby has our first book. Even some of the airports are starting to carry it. So if you see it at an airport, buy a copy so that they know that people are liking this book.
That's a good, yeah.
And then we're on the social media. I stay away from Twitter. Amy and Lindsay do that more. I think it's just the wasteland of civilization. But I like doing Instagram because there's lots of pretty pictures and cute pictures of animals. So I don't get stressed out when I go there. But we still have lots of great kind of dialogue that goes on there with different things. And then, of course, our Facebook page. And to support the ministry, if you go to our website, it'll give you a place where you can donate. You can sign up as a Patreon subscriber, or you can sign up as a one-time or a monthly gift through the nonprofit arm of the ministry. So lots of ways to get involved and lots of ways to find us.
That's awesome. The Patreon, what do people get for being a Patreon member? Is it special content that you guys have?
Oh, I wish we'd done more than that. Since there's so few of us right now, and I've been going through so many health stuff, a lot of times it'll be you get some extra detailed podcast notes that are time stamped. So we try to always give good detailed podcast notes. The general ones are on the website. The detailed ones are on for Patreon users. And if we ever make any kind of extra things like, what was it that we made? Like a list of things that you could put next to your TV to help you identify what worldview you're watching, just little things like that. But I would say our perks aren't as rigorous as they could be just because we're such a small team.
Yeah. And just to clarify, this whole thing has been about Muslim apologetics, right? So you're a Muslim. I have it in my notes. Nancy said you were a Muslim. And
Mama Bear Apologetics.
So you're not a Muslim?
Although if you have questions about Islam, ask Lindsay. She's our world religions expert.
All right. Well, we'll have to edit all the Christian stuff out. I didn't know. Yeah. So you mean you're Christian, right? You're talking about Christian apologetics.
Yes.
This is Christian apologetics, and it's got a rich heritage going back about 2,000 years. Wonderful stuff. We'll check you out on Patreon, and everybody's got to start chipping in because this is really important stuff. And we got a very brave and insightful people doing this cutting edge work. It really is cutting edge. I'm so excited about it. And I personally am a Christian as well. And so I'll never shy away from that. What sense does that make? What sense does that make to shy away from that? We're all going to die at some point.
You disown me before others, I will disown you before the Father.
We're not taking any of this with us when we go. So
nope.
It's very important stuff. Everything is contextualized by that. So thank you very much for coming on, Hillary, and Mama Bear Apologetics.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.